If you've ever wondered why Seventh-day Adventist members are so confused about the Bible, I want you to listen to these statements from one of their leading teachers. Just listen.
What did the daily sacrifice mean to the Jewish people? The daily sacrifice was the gospel. It was the plan of salvation, that this lamb and the sacrifice of this lamb would atone for their sins. The taking away of the daily sacrifice in prophecy means that the true gospel of salvation by faith in the blood of the lamb was going to be taken away, and it would be replaced by salvation by works, prayers, burning of candles, praying to saints, and a lot of paganism.
What you just heard came from a video that Doug Batchelor made in several parts. This was part one of a video called 1844, 2,300 Days Prophecy, Investigative Judgment. And what you just heard him talking about was the passage he was reading from Daniel 8, 12 through 14. You know, I got to ask, just a simple question. Where in the world does he get the daily sacrifice with the gospel to the Jews? Unless he just doesn't know, the gospel didn't even exist in the time of Daniel. There was no gospel that existed during the time of Daniel. How in the world could the daily sacrifice mean the gospel to the Jews when it didn't even exist? They don't even accept the gospel today. So let me educate the man a little bit. The daily sacrifice is just exactly what it says it is. It is the daily burnt offering, the perpetual sacrifices that was offered in the evening and in the morning. You can read about it in Numbers 28 and Exodus 29. And he's talking about this sacrifice would be the lamb that took away the sins or make atonement for sins. Again, Doug Batchelor has no idea what he's talking about when he's talking about the daily sacrifice. Doug Batchelor, the daily sacrifice had nothing to do with the atonement for sins. The daily sacrifice, the perpetual offering, the continual offering it is often called, was a sacrifice that meant total submission to God. No part of it was ever used to be sprinkled on the altar inside the Holy of Holies to atone for sins. The entire offering had to be consumed by fire. That's why it was mean a total commitment or total surrender to God. It had nothing to do with atonement. It meant total submission to God. The daily sacrifice could not have been the gospel to the Jews when in the historical setting of what you read, the gospel did not even exist. And it surely had nothing to do with atoning for sins because the daily sacrifice meant total submission to God. In fact, in verse 14, where it talks about then the sanctuary shall be cleansed. If you'd have just did any type of research at all, you'd have found out that the word cleansed in 8:14 means to be restored or rededicated to God, whereas the word cleansed in Leviticus 16, dealing with the Day of Atonement, meant to be non-contaminated. They're totally two different words for cleanse there. Just a little bit of study, and you would not have misled your people into believing that the daily sacrifice offered up for total submission to God had anything to do with the gospel or had anything to do with the Day of Atonement. Now I want you to listen to another clip here where he has Jesus just going back and forth from heaven.
Admit that he did at one point go into the Holy of Holies when he ascended was to concede what happened in 1844. Not at all. Yes, of course he went in there, he activated it, he was enthroned, his sacrifice was accepted. Then he came back down to earth and he said, all hail, they worshipped him. He met with them for 40 days, poured out the Holy Spirit at Pentecost, ascended to heaven 10 days before Pentecost, and began his work as our high priest, what would happen in the first department. Did that make sense so far?
I will try my best to let you know what he just said. Now, first of all, he's got Jesus ascending to heaven to activate the Holy of Holies. What in the world activate means, I have no idea. I guess it's kind of like a credit card, You have to have a number and go up there and key in the number to get it activated. I have no idea what he meant by activating the Holy of Holies. But anyway, he has him ascending to heaven. Now he's got him come back, and he says he met with them for 40 days. Now listen to this. He poured out the Holy Spirit on the day of Pentecost, but yet he says he ascended 10 days before Pentecost. Now, how in the world can you pour out the Holy Spirit on the day of Pentecost if you ascended 10 days before Pentecost again, unless he's come back? And if that's the case, then you've got Jesus going to heaven, coming back, going to heaven, and coming back, and going back. How many times do you think he ascended to heaven? One time, Doug Batchelor, one time. He didn't ascend to heaven, activate something, come back, pour out the Holy Spirit, 10 days before ascend to heaven, come back and pour out the Holy Spirit again on the day of Pentecost. Where do you make up this stuff at? Where do you read this in the Bible? Maybe there's some Adventist on YouTube or anywhere in the world that can show me in the Bible where Jesus ascended to heaven, activated the Holy of Holies, came back, poured out the Holy Spirit on Pentecost, and yet ascended to heaven 10 days before Pentecost again. Is there any wonder why Seventh-day Adventists are confused about their own theology? When you've got teachers like this who gets the daily sacrifice wrong, has Jesus ascending to heaven, activating something, coming back, leaving the Holy Spirit, ascending 10 days before Pentecost, but yet going back to Pentecost. Is there any wonder these Seventh-day Adventists are confused about their own theology? But all is not lost. Pastor Batchelor did get something right in this video, and I will leave you with what he did get right.
I don't claim to be a great theologian.